Hi Year 11, in this video we're going to be looking at how to use what we know about all stations to central to find exact values for angles larger than 90 degrees. So let's have a look at the first example. It says find the exact value of tan 300. So the first thing I'm going to do is just draw a little unit circle here, and tan 300 is going to be 300 degrees is going to be in the fourth quadrant, okay? Because we've got 0, 90, 180, 270. So 300 is in the fourth quadrant there. And we know that in the fourth quadrant, we find the angle by doing 360 minus theta. So I'm going to just rewrite tan 300 as tan 360 minus something. So I have to ask myself, well, 300 is 360 minus what? Well, it's 360 minus 60. Okay, the next thing I need to do is decide, we know actually that in when we write it like this is what we call the reference angle, or sometimes the related angle. So it's just going to be tan 60. But what I need to think is in this quadrant, in the fourth quadrant, is tan positive or negative? Well, in that quadrant, all stations to central, tan is negative in that quadrant. So it's going to be negative tan 60. I'm almost done. The last thing I need to do is tan 60 is an exact value. So we need to use our triangles for exact values and work out what tan 60 is going to be. So opposite over adjacent, so it'll be root 3. So this tan 60 is equal to root 3 on 1, or just root 3. So negative tan 60 will be negative root 3. Let's try the next example. Sine 225. So again, I'm going to draw my unit circle, 225, 0, 90, 180, 270. So 225 is in this quadrant here. Okay, in this quadrant, we find the angle by doing 180 plus theta. So I need to rewrite this as sine 180 plus something. So I need to work out what do I need to add to 180 to get 225, and it's going to be 45. Okay, so in this quadrant, that's the same as just sine 45, but before, well, I'll write that down. It's going to be sine 45, but all stations central, the only trig ratio that's positive in this quadrant is tan, which means sine is going to be negative in that quadrant. So it's going to be equal to negative sine 45. Now I need to use not the triangle that I drew, but the other triangle with the 45-degree angle. These are from the exact values that we did right at the beginning of the booklet. So sine 45, opposite over hypotenuse, is 1 on root 2. So sine 45 is 1 on root 2, but I need negative sine 45, so it'll be negative 1 on root 2. All right, let's have a look at the last couple of examples. Cos 150, again, I need to figure out which quadrant I'm in. 150 is in the second quadrant, okay? And in the second quadrant, we write it as 180 minus theta. So I need to write cos 180 minus something will give me 150, so it's going to be 30. So that means it'll be cos 30, but I need to decide, is it going to be positive or negative in that quadrant? All stations to central. In the second quadrant, the only trig ratio that is positive is sine, which means tan and cos are going to be negative, so it's going to be negative. Okay, so now I've got to work out what cos 30 is. Let's go back to our triangles. Cos 30 adjacent over hypotenuse, so root 3 over 2. So cos 30 is root 3 over 2. So negative cos 30 will be negative root 3 over 2. All right, let's have a look at the last one. Figure out what quadrant I'm working in. 210 is in this quadrant. So in that quadrant, it's 180 plus theta. So it's going to be tan 180 plus 30, because 210 is 180 plus 30, which means it's going to be tan 30. And let's have a look. All stations to central. Tan is actually positive in that quadrant, so I'll just put a little plus there. So then it's just equal to tan 30. So let's go back again. Tan 30 opposite over adjacent. It's going to be 1 on root 3. So it's going to be positive 1 on root 3. Okay, so with these ones, draw the diagram, work out what quadrant it's in, write this statement with the reference angle, and then determine if it's positive or negative, and then calculate the exact value. All right, here are a couple more, except now we've got cot and cosec. So let's just do exactly the same thing. I'm just going to rewrite it. Cot is 1 on tan 120. Okay, so let's talk about tan 120. That's going to be in this quadrant here, which is going to be 180 minus theta. So it's going to be 1 on tan 180 minus 60. 180 minus 60 is 120. Okay, so now I've got to decide in that quadrant. So it's going to be 1 over tan 60. But I need to decide, because 60 is the reference angle, that's why I got tan 60. I need to decide in that quadrant, is it positive or negative? Is tan positive or negative? Well, tan in the second quadrant is actually negative. So I need to put a negative out in front. All right, tan 60, I'm just going to scroll back up. So tan 60 opposite over adjacent. We did this one before, is root 3. So it's going to be negative 1 on tan 60 is root 3, so negative 1 on root 3. Let's have a look at the next one, cosec. So I'm going to rewrite it, 1 on sine 330. Which quadrant is it in? 330 is in the fourth quadrant. And we work out the angle in the fourth quadrant by doing 360 minus theta. So it's going to be 1 on sine 360 minus 30. So it'll be 1 on sine 30. But I need to decide, all stations to central, is it positive or negative in the fourth quadrant? Well, in the fourth quadrant, sine is negative, so it's going to be negative. So it's going to be negative 1 on, let's look at what sine 30 is. Sine 30, opposite over hypotenuse, is a half. So it's 1 on a half. I should say negative 1 on a half. So negative 1 divided by a half, which is the same as negative 1 times 2 over 1. So the final answer is going to be negative 2. Okay, we're going to move on to negative angles now. This can get a little bit confusing, but it's very much the same principle, okay? When it's negative angles, we measure them clockwise from the positive x-axis. So we've just been measuring the positive angles anti-clockwise, and you can see here that I've drawn it in, we measure them going this way. So compared to our positive ones, where I've got 90, 180, 270, 360, and 0. With our positive ones, this is just theta. This is 180 minus theta. This is 180 plus theta. And this is 360 minus theta. It's actually the same, but they're in different quadrants because we're going the opposite way. So in the fourth quadrant this time, measuring this way, the angle is just theta. Measuring this way, it's actually negative 180 plus theta. It's going to be negative 180 minus theta, and it's going to be negative 360 plus theta. Yeah, it might seem a little bit confusing, but when you're adding negative 360 plus an angle, you're actually going backwards that way. So let's have a look and see if we can work it out. Find the related angle for each of the following. So we're just asking what would the acute angle be. So this, which quadrant is this in? This is in the fourth quadrant. So it's going to be just theta. So it's just going to be 45. Okay, 150 is in the, negative 150 is in the third quadrant. So it's going to be negative 150 plus 30. To get 150, it's in the third quadrant, so it's negative 180 plus theta. So negative 180 plus 30 will give me negative 50. So the reference angle is just 30. Okay, negative 240, that's in the third quadrant. So in the third quadrant, we find the reference angle by doing negative 180 minus theta. So negative 180 minus 60 is going to give me negative 240. So it's going to be 60 degrees. Yeah. And the last one, 315, is in the fourth quadrant, so that's negative 360 plus theta. So negative 360 plus 45 is going to give me negative 315, so the reference angle is going to be 45. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to find the exact value of a couple of negative ones. So again, first thing I need to do is work out which quadrant it's in. So negative 120 is in the third quadrant. So in the third quadrant, it's going to be the same as negative 180 plus theta. So negative 180 plus what will give me negative 120? It's going to be plus 60. So it's going to be the same as sine 60. But all stations to central still applies. So sine is negative in that quadrant, so it's going to be negative sine 60. And then going back to our exact values, so it's going to be negative, and then I just got to work out what sine 60 is. Sine 60 root 3 on 2. Okay, let's have a look at tan negative 30. So again, it's 0, negative 90, negative 180, negative 270. So this time negative 30 is in this quadrant. So we write it out. Tan, it's just going to be in this quadrant, it's just theta. So it's just going to be tan theta. So obviously it's going to be 30 degrees. Now, is tan positive or negative in that quadrant? Well, all stations to central. Tan is negative in that quadrant, so it's actually going to be, sorry, I should have done that here. Negative tan 30. So it's going to be negative. And then again, let's have a look at our triangles. Tan 30, opposite over adjacent, is going to be 1 on root 3. Try a couple more. So firstly, work out which quadrant it's in. So 210 is in this quadrant. And in that quadrant, referring back here again, we can work it out by negative 180 minus theta. So it's going to be cos negative 180 minus theta. So I need to work out what the theta is going to be to get me negative 210. And it's going to be 30. So it's going to be cos 30. But is cos positive or negative in this quadrant with our all stations to central? Cos is negative, so it's going to be negative cos 30. And again, looking back at our exact ratios, cos 30, adjacent over hypotenuse, root 3 on 2. So we've got negative root 3 on 2. Okay. Last one. Work out which quadrant it's going to be in. So this one's negative 300, so it's actually going to be in the first quadrant. We've got negative 180, negative 270, negative 360. So it's going to be in the first quadrant. And in the first quadrant, it's equal to sine negative 360 plus theta. So it's going to be negative 360 plus 60. Now, that's going to be equal to just sine 60, but I need to work out, is it going to be positive or negative in that quadrant? All stations to central? Well, all ratios are positive in the first quadrant, so sine is positive, and sine 60, we worked it out just above, is root 3 on 2, so it'll be positive root 3 on 2. Okay. All right, guys, hopefully that is helpful for you. Go and have a go at the textbook exercises and make sure you check your answers.